Right, so was that first part all silent?
No, I have some on my end, but
Okay. So I wanted to take a chance and go over some questions. We got two questions coming in about the interviews. And so someone has been watching the hearings this week, is curious about how many cases involve firearms are granted pardons. Um, I know that there's at least three of them. This person's waiting for a hearing to get a DUI and firearms not to be carried without a license. So the first thing I want to know is how old? How old are both of those charges? Um, so that's an interesting question. And keep in mind that anything that I tell you is sort of comes out of watching hundreds of board interviews. We don't always know what the person is trying to have pardoned. The crime isn't always mentioned. The year of the crime is not always mentioned. So sometimes we know and sometimes we don't. But the answer is that plenty of pardons are being given for people that were charged with carrying a firearm without a license or carrying a firearm. Always, it depends on how old is the offense. There's misdemeanor firearm charges and there's felony firearm charges. Seems to me like the board likes it when felonies are 10 or 15 years old, that they receive a good, better review. I've also noticed the board ask people specifically, do you want to get a firearm? And while it is a constitutional right for the people applying for pardons, it is not a constitutional right. And so I don't know how they factor that in. I will, just on the subject of DUIs, tell you that I think the board looks really closely at DUIs, almost more than any other misdemeanor or felony. Drug addiction is sort of easy in a way to compartmentalize because the board is used to seeing people with drug addiction commit crimes, usually a lot of crimes over the period of the addicted lifestyle. But they also really want to know about when did the person get clean and sober, how many years have gone by. And statistics have shown that after somebody has been in recovery for over 7, 8, 9 years, the board is very agreeable to giving a fair review and considering granting a pardon in those cases. Now, I think the drugs are sort of easier in a way because usually to put drug addiction behind you, there has to be counseling and treatment and intervention and support services, and it's all just sort of widely known. I think the board's sketchy about DUIs because alcohol is the true gateway drug. It's incorporated in so many different areas of American life. And if somebody has an alcohol addiction, their board is aware that at any point you could lose a family member or a daughter or a wife, and you could relapse very, very quickly. And I think Dr. Williams would support the fact that once you relapse, you go back to the original level plus. And so the board does like to see people that have quit drinking completely. If drinking was the explanation for some earlier crimes when a person was young, that's fine and dandy. But the board believes if you got in trouble because of alcohol, when you learn your lesson, you should just leave alcohol alone. And I have seen them rule very skeptically against candidates, even if they had 10 years of sobriety, if the person still admitted to either having a six pack on the weekend or if he admits that his wife has to drive to take him out for, a sub and a beer on a Saturday night. So I'm not judging right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm simply saying that the board is very skeptical about alcohol and how it insinuates its way into somebody's life. And if you're using it in a way to explain criminal behavior, then the board, I think, expects you not to be drinking because the path to lapsing back into alcohol abuse seems to be much more slippery than somebody who has done drugs, even hard drugs, and then entered 5 or 6 or 7 years of sobriety. So that's just an aside. I also wanted to answer a question that in some hearings the board keeps pressing applicants with, why do you want a pardon? Isn't that essentially a loaded question? And what specific reasons beyond simply cleaning my record does the board actually consider compelling enough to grant a pardon? Does clean slate sealing minimize these reasons? That's an interesting question. As you may know, clean slate will hide certain misdemeanors after 7 years and certain felonies after 10 years. So if the question is asking, could the board consider the fact that clean slate is available as a reason to deny a pardon if the person is primarily giving employment concerns as the rationale for the pardon? Uh, I think it's fair. I think they could consider that. I don't know how much they discuss it. Um, why do you want to pardon? This is what I think, and this is what my people are prepped for. Is you want to have a list of answers to the questions that you can just rattle off very, very quickly. There's a variety of reasons for the pardon. I think some of the really good ones are, I want to participate in my teenagers' school events. I want to, participate in my son's scout mastering. I want to travel. I have trouble at the board and with this felony on my record. So I think they want to hear a list of reasons why it will help. One of them can certainly be, it doesn't represent me. The conviction doesn't represent me and the way I'm living my life anymore. So I do want to clean it up, but that should be one of numerous reasons, not just, I just don't like it. And along the same lines, the previous question, do you want to get a gun? I would go very lightly on if the primary reason is to get a gun, I would tend to sidestep that. I think it's much more interesting to say why it is you want to have access to firearms. Pennsylvania is a huge hunting state, and a person in a family with nephews and nieces and aunts and uncles who all hunt, saying they want to get back into the woods with family for hunting, I think that's a great reason. So when the board says, why do you want a pardon? I think there's a slew of reasons why people want pardons, and I think they should write them down and come up with the 6 best reasons and just have that written beside you so you can refer to it very quickly. And we know, because we're always saying it, but these convictions create all kinds of obstacles with housing, schooling, education, employment. I remember speaking with someone, unfortunately, a year or two ago that the board denied. She had a crime that resulted from mental health issues, and the board, I don't think, was convinced that her mental health issues were adequately resolved since there was ongoing medication and counseling. But in any case, they denied her. And she called me up afterwards and we were talking and she was in tears and she just said, Mark, I'm sleeping on the floor with mice and cockroaches because I can't get Section 8 housing. And so, yes, these convictions are huge barriers to housing, employment, and education, and those reasons should be looked at as well. So that's the questions that I had originally. I think I kept some statistics here. Over the 3 days of the board doing public interviews, public sessions, they're going to cover 172 cases. All right, that's huge because they do this in general 3 or 4 times a year. If they do it 300 times, or if they do it 3 times a year, that's going to be over 500 cases that are at least resolved or voted on one way or the other. If they meet 4 times, they're going to be pushing into close to the 700 range. So this is the real deal. I really like practicing in front of the Board of Pardons in Pennsylvania. Um, and
I teams to another one.
this teams to another one. Yeah. So this chat question is my firearms charge was a misdemeanor 38 years ago. So firearm charges can be misdemeanors or felonies. This is a misdemeanor, so smaller charge, probably almost guaranteed, got probation, and 38 years ago. 56. Yeah, so my evaluation is that you shouldn't wait any longer. The thing about requesting a pardon is that it's never guaranteed. You can see from watching all the reviews, it's a personal evaluation based on how you explain the crime and how it happened and what you've done with your life since then. You can see they give people good, thorough reviews. I think you can also see they're not eager to just, rubber stamp a pardon and recommend it just because, somebody asked for it. They really do consider it an exceptional remedy. They really do want to see that somebody has tried to pick their life back up and push it forward. They want to listen to the reasons that somebody wants a pardon. And so a 38-year-old misdemeanor, I wouldn't wait any longer. I think you're a good candidate. You have 38 years of story to tell about everything you've done with your life. Typically, it involves getting employment or having employment repeatedly at a variety of places, maybe buying a house, maybe supporting a family member, maybe getting married, maybe raising children, maybe becoming involved in the church. All these things go into the mix. And so, the other thing that I think is if this person did a misdemeanor 38 years ago, if they were 20 years old at the time, they're probably about 58 years old. Most crimes occur when people are between the ages of 18 and 27. So the only other thing that I was thinking about this charge is that it's expungible when this person turns 70. When you have people that are trying to get rid of crimes from 40, 50 years ago, you really need to keep your eyes open, because if they're 70 and they've been off of probation or parole for 10 years, then you can just go right to the expungement in the county of conviction, which is a much faster 3 to 6 month process, and not the long 2 to 3 to 4 year process. In fact, we were trying to keep an eye on, give me a second here. Um, some of the cases that the board reviewed today involved a guy who was sober for 16 years. One of the cases was a 2001 access device fraud. So that's 24-year-old access device fraud. This is a case that has been in the queue for 3 years, a 2006 possession. Here's a 2013, so a 12-year-old access device fraud, a misdemeanor of the first degree. Most of the cases that the board has been reviewing have been in the queue for about 3 to 3.3 years. Here's a 20-year-old felony, cocaine drug delivery that the board reviewed. I know there was a case that the board looked at where frequently or occasionally we're surprised because the board will either bring up a recent traffic ticket or a recent case where maybe the person wasn't even charged, but they showed up in a police report somewhere. The Board of Pardons has access to some kind of database that shows arrests or police activity. And it also seems pretty clear that the board reviews these logs before they do an interview. So any kind of police activity is less than desirable. Here's a 26-year-old felony thief receiving stolen property. And theft charges. Theft is one of the most popular crimes. With a 20, 25, 30-year-old bad check charge and a 1993 theft charge. And then the board also questioned about a 2009 failure to appear. The board just has access to deep records of everything involving the courts, the magisterial district courts, and possibly police files as well. So that's the kind of depth and breadth they have. What does the Board of Pardons look for in a strong hearing presentation? So I tell my people to have a bullet list beside them so that if the board has questions about the crime, they can answer very quickly a short, succinct statement about how they were involved in the crime. I do notice a lot of people were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't think that's a very good answer because the board wants to know how you know that you know enough to stay out of trouble. And when your answer is, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, that sounds like that could happen again at any time because you could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They want to know how you know not to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I would have a bullet list to say really quickly, how did the crime occur? Just get in, get out. You know, back when I was in college, I was selling marijuana so that I could feed my own marijuana habit. I got caught. I sold to a police informer, and I pled guilty and got probation. Also, I would have a bullet point if you go through your Section 4 answers about everything you've done with your life since then. You should have some of the key points like just sitting right beside you because you can see how they spend between 4 to 10 minutes asking people questions, and you don't want to be doing this on the fly. You don't want to be like just trying to think. You want to be focused. You want to look down at your bullet points and you can talk about how you completed schooling, you did your employment, you give back to the community, you got married, you settled down, you raised a family, your children went into the military. Just bullet points that you can hit really quickly to keep you on task. If I didn't get a public hearing this time, can I reapply and when? So the rules say that, well, this is an odd question. If I didn't get a public hearing this time, so I believe that the hearing before the public hearing is a merit review. At the merit review, you need to get at least 2 out of the 3 votes to go to the public hearing. And at the public hearing, you need to get 3 out of the 5 votes to be recommended to the governor. So this question says, if I didn't get a public hearing this time, can I reapply and when? And the answer is, if you didn't get the votes you needed to go past the merit review to have a public hearing, then the rules say that you should step out of line for a year, and then you can reapply and get back into line. And if you're denied twice, you have to wait 2 years, but I haven't seen that happen frequently. Question 3, how long after a public hearing do applicants usually hear the outcome? So fairly quickly, within a week or 2 after the public hearing, if you're recommended or you're denied, I believe you'll get a letter from the Board of Pardons telling you about either the recommendation or the denial. So that is the outcome. We listen to the votes that follow the public hearings, so you can find out the same day if you sit through the brief intermission the board takes until they come back and vote. So you can hear the outcome very quickly, and you can be notified by the board within a couple of weeks. What happens if someone doesn't show up for their scheduled hearing? That is not good because it took a couple of years to get to the scheduled hearing. If they don't show up, I would think if there was a mistake, if there was a car accident, if there was a technical problem, and somebody wrote into the board that they might reschedule it for a future session in a couple of months. I think if there's no contact at all, I don't actually know what the board's procedure is. I think they'd want to know why the person just didn't show up because it's not getting off to a good start. Okay. Does having letters of support make a difference at the public hearing stage? Letters of support are in the pardon application as supporting documentation. They're reviewed by the board before the interview, I believe. So having letters of support can support a good, strong pardon application. They're not necessarily used during the public hearing stage. How do you handle clients who are nervous or emotional before a hearing? I tell them to settle down. I would actually just admit to the board that I'm nervous. I've never done this before. They'll tell you to relax and just move forward. This also brings back the reason why the bullet point sitting beside you is important, because I think one of the worst things that can happen is if somebody gets nervous and they just start, prattling, or they just start just like, this and that, sort of riffing of whatever their stream of consciousness is. I think you need to be focused, short, sweet answers, focused on the questions. We prepare our clients to make sure that they can log on to the Zoom interview and that they're prepared for the format and the structure of the questioning. One of our clients told me that that was very beneficial. What advice do you give someone whose application was denied at merit review? I would tell them to make sure they have a copy of their application. I would tell them to wait a year and then think about refiling it. I would want to review the Section 3 explanation and the Section 4 explanation of what you've done with your life since then in order to see if there's any false steps in there or mistakes or things. But basically, sometimes I think the board just wants certain cases to be a certain age. Like, I don't think they like to pardon felonies before they're 10 or 15 years old. That's just my impression. There aren't any rules saying that. Misdemeanors, I think they'd like to see 5 to 7 years of law-abiding behavior, except I'm not sure any of that applies to marijuana, which seems to hold a special place in the pardon review process. Have you seen a trend in what the board is approving or denying lately? I've already told you that I think the board's very concerned about anybody that has alcohol-related crimes that continues to drink. I think the best pardon application for somebody that has crimes related to alcohol is to be able to say, I stopped drinking and this is when I stopped. And it should be years ago. It shouldn't be like, the week before the pardon session. I just think they want to see somebody knows that alcohol got them into trouble and they stopped drinking. Not that they stopped drinking so much, that they stopped drinking for reasons I've previously said. What's your favorite part of watching a public hearing unfold? My favorite part is hearing that there aren't any questions, but I think the board has been doing a very good job of giving everyone questions. And they're very good questions. So I like it when you see somebody giving a good, clean response to the questions that hits the nail right on the head, that keeps the review moving forward. And this stuff has to be practiced. It shouldn't just come up. Here's a question about a felony in Illinois due to a mental health diagnosis. And so, unfortunately, I cannot speak to Illinois' pardon or expungement process. Our practice is limited to PA pardon services. I don't have an Illinois pardon services. Mental health commitments, if you're involuntarily committed, frequently leads to a restriction or a loss of gun rights as well. And this is mentioned that this happened in 2018, 7 years ago. So I think this person should research how to remove a felony in Illinois, and then be aware of the fact that the mental health side of it, if you were actually involuntarily committed, that's a whole civil record that might need to be researched. And that's that. How come no attorneys are willing to go after other attorneys that have done wrong to people? Well, I believe that you will find attorneys that will sue and go after anybody. The law is a litigious field. We litigate virtually everything. We litigate guilt or innocence against the Commonwealth. We litigate who's responsible for medical damages and pain and suffering against insurance companies in the personal injury world. We litigate husbands against wives in custody cases and divorce cases and support cases. So without specifically any more details, I think there are attorneys willing to go after other attorneys. Also, this comment says other attorneys that have done wrong to people. Well, there is also, the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board that is able to review actual unethical behavior. There's also local bar associations that frequently have fee arbitration panels that will review a case of whether an attorney charged too much money or should pay a refund to somebody, depending on what's going on. So a good answer is going to be better with more facts. If you give me a more specific question, I'll give you more specific answers, but I can only say what I've said about how come no attorneys are willing to go after other attorneys that have done wrong to people. So I know that attorneys are part of the problem, that's for sure, but they can be part of the solution. And with payment plans, are all of them $300 a month after the initial down payment? We have actually modified our on-ramp so that we are willing to get started for anywhere between $500 to $1,000 down, as long as we get payment arrangement to pay at least $200 to $300 a month. We have flexibility in the down money and the monthly payment, but the flat fee is the flat fee, and that's the way it's got to be. That almost sounded like a rap, but I'm not sorry. Should we take a pause?
Okay.
Oh, actually, I will pause this because the board is going to start back up at 1:30 and it's 1:23. So if anybody finds value in this, we're going to keep doing live streams. I also want to do a live stream to help people ask AI if there's ways to improve their employment situation or living situation, and maybe that'll be of value to people too. So look for that in the future, and have a great June 6th, 2025.